First and foremost, I am happy that Kyle Rittenhouse was acquitted on all charges, and this is the reason why. I'm not a liberal. I'm not a conservative. I don't identify with the Republican or Democratic Party. For one, I believe that America should have more than one political identity for people to identify with. I think it's a shame that we only have two major political parties, and I think that causes people to be tribal, and I think that causes people to be psychologically brainwashed, basically, because you only have two choices. And human beings are creative people, thinking people, people with goals, people who have struggles, people who have challenges, people who have desires, people who have experiences, people who are people. So it's just difficult for me to box all of those human characteristics and all of the uniqueness of one human being into two categories. But we're talking about the law. You know, Kyle Rittenhouse came to that protest with a weapon. A lot of people argue that he shouldn't have done that. But that's not a legal question. The bottom line is, in the state that he was in, it was completely legal for him to come there with a firearm. People assume that he came there just to kill people. That's not the case. Kyle Rittenhouse showed a lot of restraint. If you are non-biased, and if you watch all of the video footage, you will see that he did not engage in reckless fire. He showed an amazing amount of restraint when he was at that protest, and the only time he actually fired his weapon is when he was cornered by the guy who was trying to beat him with the skateboard and the other people who were trying to attack him. Okay? Now, Kyle Rittenhouse came to that protest because he wanted to defend the businesses. Of course, we all remember the protests that were occurring over the summertime. There was a lot of damage being done to businesses. There was a lot of fires being started. And all of this stuff was being started by a lot of these white anarchists and a lot of these white liberals. And as a black man, I don't consider myself to be a part of the cultural civil war between liberal white people and conservative white people. Because believe it or not, that's what the issue is. That's the division that's going on in our country right now. Black people don't have anything to do with it. Each group is trying to recruit black people and other people to their cause, you know, as their mercenaries. But the war is between those two groups of cultural groups. You know, those two cultural groups are going at it. And people on the left were attending these protests, specifically white anarchists, liberals, and they wanted to send political messages to the establishment by damaging businesses, setting fires. In their minds, they thought that this was realpolitik. They thought that this was the best way for them to shatter the system, destroy the system, and I guess they thought that by destroying things, they could receive the sort of attention and America will notice its problems and become a better place or something like that. I don't know what their reason for doing it was, but the reality of the situation is, if these people on the left intentionally come to these protests to destroy things as a way of sending a political message to the establishment, then people like Kyle Rittenhouse and people who identify as conservatives have the right to come to these protests and defend the businesses. You know, you can't say that it's okay for the liberals, the anarchists, to come to these protests and destroy things intentionally. You know, these white kids who grew up in upper-class suburban households who are so desperate to be a part of some sort of struggle, that are so desperate to be a part of this so-called proletariat. You know, they've been studying all this Maoist theology, they've been studying all this revolutionary ideology, and they looked at these protests as an opportunity to be real revolutionaries. So if they have the right to do that, then the conservatives like Kyle Rittenhouse have the right to attend the protests and express themselves. The conservatives, their whole thing was this: the protests were being mismanaged and misused. They were supposed to be about racial justice, but these people from the left infiltrated these protests and started destroying businesses and turned it into basically angry mobs. And I didn't appreciate that because black people really have a lot of struggles in this country. And the fact that these white liberals came under the guise of fighting for black equality, did all of this destruction, and were setting all of these different structures and cars on fire. I think that was terrible because it gave a bad name to the protests, and it distorted the reason that we were out there. So my whole thing is this: you can't say that it's okay for the liberals to go out and protest in the way that they wanted to, which was, the type of revolutionary protest that included destroying things, because they looked at what they were doing as burning down the establishment, literally and figuratively. You can't accept that without accepting the fact that the other side has a right to protest the way that they wanted to. Cal Rittenhouse, he came with a first aid kit because during these protests, a lot of conservatives were being beat up. That's a fact. And a lot of businesses were being damaged. So he came in honor of that. That's what he planned to do. Protect the businesses and to help out people who were injured by these mobs, because one of the biggest misconceptions about the left is that they're not violent. Now, they want you to think that all conservatives are rednecks that carry guns, who are extremely racist and extremely violent, but that's not the case all the time. You can't generalize an entire group of people based on the actions of a few. All Democrats and all people on the left are not violent revolutionaries, wannabe proletariat people they're not that as well. But there's a lot of them that fit that description, and a lot of them were taking advantage of the protests last summer to implement their revolutionary ideology. And those guys were literally trying to attack Cal Rittenhouse. So it was an obvious self-defense thing. You got to take your personal emotions out of it. Whether you're on the left or whether you're on the right, you can't look at it from political lens. You can't look at it from cultural lens. You got to look at the situation from a legal lens. The guy was being attacked by people. If he came to that protest intending to hurt people, why did he come with a first aid kit? Why was it that the entire time that he was there, he was able to restrain his fire? He didn't shoot. He was very safe with his weapon. The only time he actually discharged his weapon is when he was being attacked. And these white guys were trying to attack him. And God forbid, that kid who was short, had he not been shot, he may have killed Cal Rittenhouse. Because liberals hate conservatives and conservatives hate liberals. You got to understand, this is the main root of all of the division that's going on in our country right now. You've got these two different cultural groups that have totally different views of the world, totally different views of the country, totally different goals for the country, and they can't coexist with each other. They can't agree to disagree. They can't understand the fact that people generally agree with each other more than they disagree. They're so focused on the disagreeing part that they've allowed that to cloud their judgment, and they've allowed that to tribalize them, and they've allowed that to make them hate each other. So yeah, you've got some angry liberals out there, just like you've got some angry conservatives out there who look at themselves as being some sort of military, or they look at themselves as having to fight. Literally fight for change. They think that the country is so messed up because of the other side, because of their rivals, because of their adversaries, and they think that they have no other choice but to literally fight them and hurt them. And I don't care who you are, I don't care what you believe in, nobody deserves to get beat up or attacked because of their political beliefs. Cal Rittenhouse, even though I might disagree with his political whatever or his cultural views, I would never attack the man at all. If I seen him walking around with a gun, I would say, hey, he has the right to do that, because in Wisconsin, it's legal for him to do that. So why would I take that offensive as an offense to me? Why would I take a white kid walking around with a gun as offensive to me? Why would I take that as a call to action? Why would I try to go beat him up simply because he has a gun? I mean, the bottom line is the liberal guy who tried to beat him up with the skateboard, he was attempting to set a business on fire. He was trying to light a trash can on fire that Cal Rittenhouse is next to. Cal Rittenhouse put the fire out, and then the kid got angry at him and chased him with a skateboard trying to beat him up. Cal ran away. Then once he got cornered in between some cars, he shot the guy. So at the end of the day, please take your biases away from the situation. If it was your son and your was being violently chased and attacked by some liberals who think that they're the proletariat, who think that they're revolutionaries, who think that, we're in Cuba in the 1950s fighting against Batista. They're so enamored with revolutionary culture. They're so in love with the past. They're so in love with these revolutionaries that we read about in history books, and they want to embody that in their own personal life to the point where they're misinterpreting what's going on in America at this point. They're thinking that America's problems can't be solved by us putting our heads together. They think that the only way they can solve these problems is by violence, is by revolutionary fervor, and that's not the case. This is not Nazi Germany in the 1930s. In a situation like that, the only way you can fix things is through violence, through revolution. But in America, all we have are little cultural differences that are mainly between liberal white people and conservative white people. But still, the issue is not so bad that we need to fight and go to war and physically assault each other. There's ways to deal with that. And like I said, agree to disagree. You got more in common with somebody than you don't. So the bottom line is, I know this is, I'm babbling on, but I'm not disappointed with the verdict, because at the end of the day, if this was your son, you would want him to get a fair trial. I don't want to see anybody go serve the rest of their life in jail because somebody doesn't agree with their politics. The bottom line is, he had a right to be at that protest, just like any liberal Democrat had a right to be at that protest. His way of protesting was to protect the businesses. Yeah, you can say he's 18, don't protect it. If something happens to the businesses, just let the insurance companies deal with it. But he didn't want to do that. He had the right to go out there and protect the businesses, and he had a right to go out there and put out the fires. The kid had a medical kit. He was going to help people in need. Yeah, maybe he shouldn't have brought the gun with him, but it was legal for him to do that, so that's not the case. In a court of law, it's all about law. The liberal Democrats, we've got to call them out. For a long time, they've been getting away with murder. They point at the conservative Republicans and make it like these guys are all stupid rednecks. They're all racist. They're all homophobic. They're all violent. You can't trust them. The only way to deal with them is to beat them up because they're so backwards. They want to take America back to the 1950s. And the liberal Democrats are supposed to be perfect. They don't do anything wrong. All they care about is life and liberty for all. And that's just not the case. Liberal Democrats can be just as obtuse. They can be just as violent. They can be just as, they are what they say they hate. A lot of times they don't value other people's opinions, and a lot of times if you disagree with them, they want to shut you up. So at the end of the day, the justice was served. I don't think the cow should have been charged anyway. But at the end of the day, you have to be happy, because at the end of the day, our justice system is supposed to be based on the law. Lady Liberty is blind because she doesn't have any bias. She's not going to make a decision based on what she sees. She's going to make a decision based on what she knows the law is, So peace.